Tom Swift and His Airship by Victor Appleton. Chapter 12. Some Startling News. "Well, there they go," remarked Mrs. Baggert to Mr. Swift as she strained her eyes toward the sky, against the blue of which the airship was now only a large black ball. "Yes, and a fine start they made," replied the inventor. "I almost wish I had accompanied them, but I must not stop work on my submarine invention." "I do hope nothing will happen to them," went on the housekeeper. "I declare, though, I feel just as if something was going to happen." "Nervousness, pure nervousness," commented Mr. Swift. "Better take a little air. I suppose catnip tea would be good." "Catnip tea? The very idea!" exclaimed Mrs. Baggert. "That shows how much you know about nervousness, Mr. Swift." And she seemed a little indignant. Well, maybe catnip tea wouldn't be just the thing. But don't worry about Tom. I'm sure he can look after himself. As for Mr. Sharp, he has made too many ascensions to run into any unnecessary danger." "Nervous," went on the housekeeper, who seemed to resent this state being applied to her. "I'm sure I'm not half as nervous as that Mr. Damon. He gives me the fidgets." "Of course. Well, I must get back to my work," said the inventor. "Are you hurt, Eradicate?" he went on, as the man came back, driving Boomerang, who had been stopped just before reaching the road. "No, Mr. Swift, I ain't exactly damaged, but my feelin's am sure hurted." "How's that?" "Well, I thought I had growed strong in de night when I lifted that airship, but when I went to stop my mule I couldn't do it. He won't have no respect for me now." "Oh, I wouldn't let that worry me," commented Mr. Swift, and he explained to Eradicate how it was that he had so easily lifted the end of the buoyant ship, which weighed very little when filled with gas. The man proceeded with his work of whitewashing. The inventor was in his library, puzzling over tables of intricate figures, and Mrs. Baggert was in the kitchen, sighing occasionally as she thought of Tom, who she loved almost as a son, high in the air, when two men came up the walk from the street and knocked at the side door. Mrs. Baggert, who answered their summons, was somewhat surprised to see Chief of Police Simpson and Constable Higby. "They probably came to see the airship start," she thought, "but they're too late." "Good morning, Mrs. Baggert," greeted the chief. "Is Mr. Swift and his son about this morning?" "Mr. Swift is in his library, but Tom is gone." "He'll be back, though, won't he?" asked Constable Higby quickly, anxiously, Mrs. Baggert thought. "Oh, yes," she replied. "He and—" "Just take us to see Mr. Swift," interrupted the chief, with a look of caution at his aide. "We'll explain matters to him." Wondering what could be the mission of the two officers, Mrs. Baggert led them to the library. "It's queer," she thought, "that they don't ask something about the airship. I suppose that was what they came for. But maybe it's about the mysterious men who robbed Mr. Swift." "Gentlemen, what can I do for you?" asked the inventor as he rose to greet the officials. "Mr. Swift, that is, well, the fact is, Mr. Swift," stammered the chief, "we have come upon a very painful errand." "What's that?" cried Tom's father. "I haven't been robbed again, have I?" "There has been a robbery committed," spoke the constable quickly. "But you are not the victim," interposed the chief. "I'm glad of that," said Mr. Swift. "Where's your son, Tom?" asked the head of the Shopton police force sharply. "What do you want with him?" inquired the inventor, struck by some strange tone in the other's voice. "Mr. Swift," went on the chief solemnly, "I said we came upon a very painful errand. It is painful, as I have known Tom since he was a little lad, but I must do my duty, no matter how painful it is. I have a warrant for the arrest of your son, Thomas Swift, and I have come to serve it. I need not tell you that it is your duty to give him up to us, the representatives of the law. I call upon you to produce your son." Mr. Swift staggered to his feet. "My son? You have come to arrest my son?" he stammered. The chief nodded grimly. "Upon what charge?" faltered the father. "On a charge of breaking into the Shopton National Bank last night and stealing from the vault $75,000 in currency." $75,000! Tom accused of robbing the bank, faltered Mr. Swift. "That is the charge, and we've come to arrest him," broke in Constable Higbee. "Where is he?" added the chief. "This charge is false, absolutely false," shouted the aged inventor. "That may be," admitted the chief, shaking his head, "but the charge has been made, and we hold the warrant. The courts will settle it. We must now arrest Tom. Where is he?" "He isn't here," cried Mr. Swift, and, small blame to him, there was a note of triumph in his voice. "Tom sailed away not half an hour ago in the airship Red Cloud. You can't arrest him." "He's escaped," shouted the constable. "I told you, Chief, that he was a slippery customer, and that we'd better come before breakfast." "Dry up," commanded the chief testily. "So he's foiled us, eh? Run away when he knew we were coming. I think that looks like guilt, Mr. Swift." "Never," cried the inventor. "Tom would never think of robbing the bank. Besides, he has all the money he wants. The charge is preposterous. I demand to be confronted with the proof." "You shall be," answered Chief Simmons vindictively. "If you will come to the bank you can see the rifled vault, and hear the testimony of a witness who saw your son with burglar tools in his possession last night. We also have a warrant for Mr. Wakefield Damon. Do you know anything of him?" "He has gone with my son in the airship." "Ah, the two criminals with their booty have escaped together," cried the chief. "But we'll nab them if we have to scour the whole country. Come on, Higbee. Mr. Swift, if you will accompany me to the bank, I think I can give you all the proof you want." And the officials, followed by the amazed and grief-stricken inventor, left the house. End of chapter. Tom Swift and His Airship, by Victor Appleton. Chapter 13. Mr. Damon in Danger. The sensations of the voyagers in the airship, who meanwhile were flying along over the country surrounding Shopton, were not very different than when they had undertaken some trial flights. In fact, Mr. Damon was a little disappointed after they had waved their farewells to Mr. Swift and Mrs. Baggert. "I declare I'm not at all nervous," he remarked, as he sat in an easy chair in the enclosed car or cabin and looked down at the earth through the plate glass windows in the floor. "I thought you'd be all right once we got started," commented Mr. Sharp. "Do you think you can stand going a trifle higher?" "Try it," suggested the eccentric man. "Bless my watch chain, but as I said, I might as well die this way as any other. Hitting a cloud bank is easier than trying to climb a tree on a motorcycle. Eh, Tom?" "Very much so, Mr. Damon," conceded the young inventor with a laugh. "Oh, we'll not attempt any cloud heights for a day or two," went on Mr. Sharp. "I want you to gradually get used to the rarefied atmosphere, Mr. Damon. Tom and I are getting to be old hands at it, but if you think you can stand it, I'll go up about 1,000 feet higher." "Make it 2,000 while you're at it," proposed the odd character. "Might as well take a long fall as a short one." Accordingly, the elevation rudder was used to send the Red Cloud to a greater height, while she was still skimming along like some great bird. Of course, the desired elevation could have been obtained by forcing more gas from the machine into the big red container overhead, but it was decided to be as sparing of this vapor as possible, since the voyagers did not want to descend to get more material in case they used up what they had. It was just as easy to rise by properly working the rudders when the ship was in motion, and that was the method now employed. With the great propellers, fore and aft, making about 1,000 revolutions a minute, the craft slanted up toward the sky. The ship was not being run at top speed, as Mr. Sharp did not care to force it, and there was no need for haste. Long distance, rather than high speed, was being aimed at on this first important flight. Tom was at the steering wheel, and with his hand on the lever controlling the elevation rudder, kept watch of the face of Mr. Damon, occasionally noting what height the hand on the gauge registered. He fancied he saw the cheeks of his friend growing pale, and when a height of 3,500 feet was indicated with a yank, the young inventor put the airship on a level keel. "Are you distressed, Mr. Damon?" he asked.
Yes, I have some difficulty in breathing," was the answer.
Tom gave his friend the same advice the aeronaut had given the lad on his first trip, and the eccentric man soon felt better.
"Bless my buttons," he ventured to explain, "but I feel as if I had lost several pounds of flesh, and I'm glad of it."
Mr. Sharp was busy with the motor, which needed some slight adjustments, and Tom was in sole charge of navigating the airship. He had lost the nervous feeling that first possessed him, and he was becoming quite an expert at meeting various currents of wind encountered in the upper regions. Below, the voyagers could see the earth spread out like a great map. They could not tell their exact location now, but by calculating their speed, which was about 30 miles an hour, Tom figured out that they were above the town of Centerford, near where he had been attacked once by the model thieves. For several hours the airship kept on her way, maintaining a height of about a mile, for when it was found that Mr. Damon could accommodate himself to 3,500 feet, the elevation rudder was again shifted to send the craft upward. By using glasses, the travelers could see crowds on the earth watching their progress in the air, and though airships, dirigible balloons, and aeroplanes are getting fairly common now, the appearance of one as novel and as large as the Red Cloud could always be depended upon to attract attention. "Well, what do you say to something to eat?" proposed Mr. Sharp, coming into the main cabin from the motor compartment. "It's 12 o'clock, though we can't hear the factory whistles up here." "I'm ready any time you are," called Tom from the pilot house. "Shall I cook grub, Mr. Sharp?" "No, you manage the ship and I'll play cook. We'll not get a very elaborate meal this time, as I shall have to pay occasional visits to the motor, which isn't running just to suit me." The electrical stove was set going, and some soup and beefsteak from among the stores was put on the fire. In spite of the fact that the day was a warm one in October, it was quite cool in the cabin until the stove took off the chill. The temperature of the upper regions was several degrees below that of the earth. At times the ship passed through little wisps of vapor clouds in the making.
"Isn't this wonderful!" exclaimed Mr. Damon as he sat in an easy chair partaking of some of the food. "To think that I have lived to see the day when I can take my lunch a mile in the air, with a craft flying along like a bird. Bless my knife and fork, but it certainly is wonderful."
Mr. Sharp relieved Tom at the wheel while the young inventor ate, and then, with the airship heading southwest, the speed was increased a trifle, the balloonist desiring to see what the motor could accomplish under a heavy load. A drop of several hundred feet was made about an hour later, and as this made it warmer, Mr. Damon, who was a great lover of fresh air, decided to go out on the platform in front of the cabin. This platform and a similar one at the rear was railed about to prevent accidents. A fine view could be had from them, much better than through the floor windows of the car. "Be careful of the propeller," advised Tom as his friend went outside. "I don't believe you're tall enough to be hit by the blades, but don't take any chances of standing on your tiptoes."
"Bless my pocket handkerchief, indeed I'll not," came the answer, "but I think I shall wrap up my throat with the scarf I brought along. I am subject to neuralgia, and the breeze may bring on an attack of it."
Wrapping a long woolen scarf about his neck, the eccentric man ventured out on the platform. About the middle of it, but sufficiently high to be above a person's head, was the forward propeller, whirling around at a swift speed. Tom, with his eye on the various gauges and the compass, was steering the airship. He glanced at Mr. Damon, who appeared to be enjoying the view from the platform. For an instant the eyes of the lad were taken from the form of his friend. He looked back suddenly, however, his attention attracted by a smothered cry. He was horrified by what he saw. Mr. Damon was leaning far over the edge of the railing, with nothing between him and the earth 1,000 feet below. He seemed to have lost his balance, and had toppled forward, being doubled up on the iron pipe railing, his hands hanging limply over. Then, as Tom cried to Mr. Sharp to shut off the motor, the lad saw that hanging to the blade of the propeller, and being whirled around in its revolutions was a part of Mr. Damon's red scarf. "Hurry, hurry, Mr. Sharp!" yelled Tom, not daring to let go the steering wheel for fear the ship would encounter a treacherous current and tilt. "Hurry to Mr. Damon!" "What's the matter?" asked the balloonist. "He's dead, or unconscious, hanging over the railing. He seems to be slipping. Hurry, or it will be too late." End of chapter. Tom Swift and His Airship by Victor Appleton. Chapter 14. Andy Gives the Clue. When Mr. Swift followed the chief of police and the constable to the town hall, his mind was filled with many thoughts. All his plans for revolutionizing submarine travel were of course forgotten, and he was only concerned with the charge that had been made against his son. It seemed incredible, yet the officers were not ones to perpetrate a joke. The chief and constable had driven from town in a carriage, and they now invited the inventor to ride back with them. "Do you mean to tell me a warrant has actually been sworn out against my son, Chief?" asked the father when they were near the town hall. "That's just what I mean to say, Mr. Swift, and I'm sorry on your account. I'll have to serve it." "Hub, don't look like you was going to serve it," remarked the constable. "He skipped out." "It's all right, Higbee," went on the chief. "I'll catch 'em both. Even if they have escaped in an airship with their booty, I'll nab 'em. I'll have a general alarm out all over the country in less than an hour. They can't stay up in the air forever." "A warrant for Tom, my son," murmured Mr. Swift, as if he could not believe it. "Yes, and for that Damon man, too," added the chief. "I want him as well as Tom, and I'll get him." "Would you mind letting me see the warrants?" asked the inventor, and the official passed them over. The documents were made out in regular form, and the complaints had been sworn to by Isaac Pendergast, the bank president. "I can't understand it," went on Tom's father. $75,000. It's incredible. Why," he suddenly exclaimed, "it can't be true. Just before he left Mr. Damon—" "Yes, what did he do?" asked the chief eagerly, thinking he might secure some valuable evidence. "I guess I'll say nothing until I have seen the bank president," replied Mr. Swift, and the official was obviously disappointed. The inventor found Mr. Pendergast and some other bank officials in the town hall. The financiers were rather angry when they learned that the accused persons had not been caught, but the chief said he would soon have them in custody. "In the meanwhile, will you kindly explain what this means?" asked Mr. Swift of the president. "You may come and look at the looted vault if you like, Mr. Swift," replied Mr. Pendergast. "It was a very thorough job and will seriously cripple the bank." There was no doubt that the vault had been forced open, for the locks and bars were bent and twisted as if by heavy tools. Mr. Swift made a careful examination and was shown the money drawers that had been smashed. This was the work of experts, he declared. "Exactly what we think," said the president. "Of course, we don't believe your son was a professional bank robber, Mr. Swift. We have the theory that Mr. Damon did the real work, but that Tom helped him with the tools he had. There's no doubt about it." "What right have you to accuse my son?" burst out the aged inventor. "Why have you any more cause to suspect him than any other lad in town? Why do you fix on him and Mr. Damon? I demand to know." "Mr. Damon's eccentric actions for a few days past and his well-known oddity of character make him an object of suspicion," declared the president in judicial tones. "As for Tom, we have, I regret to say, even better evidence against him." "But what is it? What? Who gave you any clues to point to my son?" "Do you really wish to know?" "I certainly do," was the sharp reply. Mr. Swift, the police, and several bank officials were now in the president's office. The latter pressed an electric bell, and when a messenger answered, he said, "Send young Foger here." At the mention of this name, Mr. Swift started. He knew the red-haired bully was an enemy of his son, and he entered, walking rather proudly at the attention he attracted. "This is Mr. Swift," said the president. "I know him," blurted out Andy.
"You will please tell him what you told us," went on Mr. Pendergast.
"Well, I seen Tom Swift hanging around the bank with burglar tools in his possession last night, just before it was robbed," exclaimed the squint-eyed lad triumphantly. "Hanging around the bank last night with burglar tools," repeated Mr. Swift in dazed tone.
"That's right," from Andy.
"How do you know they were burglar tools?"
"Because I saw 'em," cried Andy. "He had 'em in a valise on his motorcycle. He was standing at the corner, waiting for a chance to break into the bank, and when me and Sam Snedeker saw him he pretended to be fixing his machine. Then the bag of burglar tools fell off, the satchel came open, and I seen 'em. That's how I know."
"And you're sure they were burglar tools?" asked the chief, for he depended on Andy to be his most important witness.
"Sure I am. I seen a picture of burglar tools once. The ones Tom had was just like 'em. Long-handled wrenches, bracing bits, and all. He tried to hide 'em, but me and Sam was too quick for him. He wanted to lick me, too."
"No doubt you deserve it," murmured Mr. Swift. "But how do you know my son was waiting for a chance to break into the bank?"
"'Cause wasn't it robbed right after he was hanging around here with the burglar tools?"
inquired Andy, as if that was unanswerable. "What were you hanging around here for?" Mr. Swift demanded quickly.
"Me? Oh, well, me and Sam Snedeker was out taking a walk, that's all."
"You didn't want to rob the bank, did you?" went on the inventor keenly.
"Of course not," roared the bully indignantly. "I ain't got no burglar tools."
Andy told more along the same line, but his testimony of having seen Tom near the bank with a bag of odd tools could not be shaken. In fact, it was true as far as it went, but of course the tools were only those for the airship, the same ones Mr. Sharp had sent the lad after. Sam Snedeker was called in after Andy and told substantially the same story. Mr. Swift could not understand it, for he knew nothing of Tom being sent for tools, and had not heard any talk at home of the bag of implements ordered by the balloonist. Still, of course, he knew Tom had nothing to do with the robbery, and he knew his son had been at home all the night previous. Still, this was rather negative evidence, but the inventor had one question yet to ask. "You say you also suspect Mr. Damon of complicity in this affair," he went on to the chief of police.
"We sure do," replied Mr. Simpson.
"Then can you explain," proceeded the inventor, "how it is that Mr. Damon has on deposit in this bank a large sum? Would he rob the bank where his own funds were?"
"We are prepared for that," declared the president. "It is true that Mr. Damon has about $10,000 in our bank, but we believe that he deposited it only as a blind, so as to cover up his tracks. It is a deep-laid scheme, and escaping in the airship is part of it. I am sorry, Mr. Swift, that I have to believe your son and his accomplice guilty, but I am obliged to. Chief, you had better send out a general alarm. The airship ought to be easy to trace."
"I'll telegraph at once," said the official. "And you believe my son guilty solely on the testimony of these two boys, who, as is well known, are his enemies?" asked Mr. Swift.
"The clue they gave us is certainly most important," said the president. "Andy came to us and told what he had seen as soon as it became known that the bank had been robbed."
"And I'm going to get the reward for giving information of the robbers, too," cried the bully. "I'm going to have my share," insisted Sam.
"Ah, then there is a reward offered?" inquired Mr. Swift. "$5,000, answered Mr. Pendergast. "The directors, all of whom are present, save Mr. Foger, Andy's father, met early this morning and decided to offer that sum."
"And I'm going to get it," announced the red-haired lad again.
Mr. Swift was much downcast. There seemed to be nothing more to say, and being a man unversed in the ways of the world, he did not know what to do. He returned home. When Mrs. Baggert was made acquainted with the news, she waxed indignant.
"Our Tom a thief?" she cried. "Why don't they accuse me and Mr. Jackson and you? The idea!" You ought to hire a lawyer, Mr. Swift, and prosecute those men for slander." "Do you think it would be a good plan?" "I certainly do. Why, they have no evidence at all. What does that mean? Sneaking Andy Foger amount to? Get a lawyer, and have Tom's interests looked after." Mr. Swift, glad to have sane one's share of the responsibility with, felt somewhat better when a well-known Shopton attorney assured him that the evidence against Tom was of such a flimsy character that it would scarcely hold in a court of justice. "But they have warrants for him and Mr. Damon," declared the inventor. "Very true, but it is easy to swear out a warrant against anyone. It's a different matter to prove a person guilty." "But they can arrest my son." "Yes, if they catch him. However, we can soon have him released on bail." "It's disgraceful," said Mrs. Baggert. "Not at all, my dear madam, not at all. Good and innocent persons have been arrested." "They are going to send out a general alarm for my son," bewailed Mr. Swift. "Yes, but I fancy it will be some time before they catch him and Mr. Damon. If the airship holds together, I can't think of a better way to keep out of the clutches of the police. And their silly charge," chuckled the lawyer. "Now, don't worry, Mr. Swift. It will all come out all right." The inventor tried to believe so, but though he knew his son was innocent, it was rather hard to see within the next few days. Big posters on all the vacant walls and fences offering a reward of $5,000 for the arrest of Tom Swift and Wakeful Damon, who were charged with having flown away in an airship with $75,000 of the bank's money. "I guess Tom Swift will wish he'd been more decent to me when I collect that money for his arrest," said Andy to his crony Sam the day the bills were posted. "Yes, but I get my share, don't I?" asked Sam. "Sure," answered the bully. "I wish they'd hurry up and arrest him." Within the next few days the country was covered with posters telling of the robbery and the reward. The police officials in cities large and small, and in towns and villages, were notified by telegraph to arrest and capture, at any cost, the occupants of a certain large red airship. Mr. Swift, on the advice of his lawyer, sent several telegrams to Tom, apprising him of what had happened. The telegraph company was asked to rush the telegrams to the first city when word came in that the Red Cloud had landed. End of chapter. Tom Swift and His Airship by Victor Appleton. Chapter 15. Fired Upon. Tom's excited call to the aeronaut telling of the mishap to Mr. Damon was answered immediately. Mr. Sharp jumped forward from the motor compartment and, passing on his way the electric switch, he yanked it out, stopping the machinery and the great propellers. Then he leaped out on the platform. But something else happened just before the accident to the eccentric man. Desiring to give a further test to the planes, the gas had been shut off, making the airship an aeroplane instead of a dirigible balloon. Consequently, as soon as the forward motion ceased, the great ship began falling. "We're sinking! We're sinking!" cried Tom, forgetting for a moment that he was not in his motorboat. "Slide your rudder up and glide downward as slowly as you can," directed Mr. Sharp. "I'll start the engine again as soon as I rescue him." For it was risky to venture out on the platform with the propeller whirring, as the dangling piece of scarf might whip around the balloonist and toss him off. Mr. Sharp was soon at Mr. Damon's side. He saw that the man was unconscious. Whether from fright or some injury could not be determined. There was, however, no sign of a wound. It was no easy task to carry, half dragging it, the heavy body of Mr. Damon off the platform, but the aeronaut was a muscular individual, and long hanging from a trapeze at great heights stood him in great stead. He brought the unconscious man into the cabin, and then, quickly returning to the platform, he detached the piece of scarf from the propeller blade. Next he started the motor and also turned on the gas tank so that the airship in a few minutes could float in space without motion. "You needn't steer now, Tom," said the balloonist. "Just give me a hand here." "Is he dead?" inquired the lad, his voice faltering. "No, his heart's beating. I can't understand what happened." Mr. Sharp was something of a rough-and-ready surgeon and doctor, and a small box of medicines had been brought along in case of emergencies. With the Red Cloud now lazily floating in the air, for once the falling motion had been checked by the engine. The motor had been stopped again. Mr. Sharp set about restoring Mr. Damon to consciousness. It was not long before the man opened his eyes. The color that had left his cheeks came back, and after a drink of cold water he was able to sit up.
"Did I fall?"
he asked.
"Bless my very existence, but did I tumble off the airship?"
"No, indeed," replied Tom, "though you came pretty near it. How do you feel? Were you hurt?"
"I'm all right now, just a trifle dizzy. But I thought sure I was a goner when I fell over the platform railing."
Mr. Damon could not repress a shudder. Mr. Sharp administered some more medicine, and his patient was soon able to stand and move about. "How did it happen?" inquired the balloonist.
"I hardly know," answered Mr. Damon. "I was out on the platform, looking at the view, and thinking how much better my neuralgia was with the scarf on. Suddenly the wind whipped loose one end of the scarf, and before I knew it the cloth had caught on the propeller blade. I was blown or drawn to one side, tossed against the railing, which I managed to grab, and then I lost my senses. It's a good thing I wasn't whirled around the propeller."
"It's a good thing you weren't tossed down to the earth," commented Tom, shivering as he thought of his friend's narrow escape.
"I became unconscious partly because the wind was knocked from me as I hit the platform railing," went on Mr. Damon, "and partly from fright, I think. But I'm all right now, and I'm not going out on that platform again with a loose scarf."
"I wouldn't go out at all again if I were you, though. Of course, I'm used to dizzy heights," spoke Mr. Sharp.
"Oh, I'm not so easily frightened," declared Mr. Damon. "If I'm going to be a balloonist or an aeroplanist, I've got to get used to certain things. I'm all right now."
And the plucky man was, for the blow to his side did not amount to much. It was some time, however, before Tom got over the fright his friend had caused him. They spent that night moving slowly south, and the morning found they had covered about 100 miles, not having run the ship to anything like its maximum speed. Breakfast was served above the clouds for a change, Mr. Damon finding that he could stand the great height with comfort. It was 3 days after the start, and the travelers were proceeding slowly along. They were totally unaware, of course, of the sensation which their leaving, conjointly with the bank robbery, had caused, not only in Shopton, but in other places. "We're over a good-sized city," announced Tom on the noon of the third day. "Suppose we drop down and leave some message. Dad will be anxious to hear from us." "Good idea," commented Mr. Sharp. "Down it is. Shift the rudder." Tom proceeded to do so, and while Mr. Damon relieved him at the wheel, the young inventor prepared a message to his father. It was placed in a weighted envelope, together with a sum of money, and the person picking it up was requested to send the letter as a telegram, retaining some money for his trouble. As the ship got lower and lower over the city, the usual crowd could be seen congregating in the streets, pointing and gazing upward. "We're creating quite a stir," observed Tom. "More than usual, it seems," added Mr. Sharp, peering down. "I declare there seems to be a police parade under way."
"That's right,"
put in Damon, for looking down, a squad of uniformed officers, some on horseback, could be seen hurrying along the main street, trying to keep pace with the airship, which was moving slowly. "They're looking at us through telescopes," called Tom. "Guess they never saw a balloon down this way." Nearer and nearer to the city dropped the Red Cloud. Tom was about to let go the weighted envelope when from the midst of the police came several puffs of white smoke. It was followed by vicious zipping sounds about the cabin of the ship, the windows of which were open. Then came the reports of several rifles. "They're firing at us!" yelled Tom.
"So they are!"
cried Mr. Sharp. "They must be crazy. Can't they see we're not a bird?"
"Maybe they take us for a war balloon,"
suggested Mr. Damon. Another volley was directed at the airship, and several bullets struck the big aluminum gas holder, glancing blows.
"Here, quit that!" yelled Tom, leaning out the window. "Are you crazy? You'll damage us."
"They can't hear you," called Mr. Sharp. A third volley was fired, and this time several persons other than police officers seemed to be shooting at the airship. Revolvers as well as rifles were being used.
"We've got to get out of this,"
shouted Mr. Sharp as a bullet sang uncomfortably close to his head. "I can't imagine what's gotten into the people. Send her up, Tom." The lad quickly shifted the elevation rudder, and the Red Cloud sailed majestically aloft.
The young inventor had not dropped his message, concluding that citizens who would fire on travelers of the air for no reason would not be likely to accommodate them in the matter of sending messages. The craft mounted rapidly upward, but before it was beyond rifle shot another volley was fired, one bullet sending some splinters flying from the wooden framework. "Whew, that was a narrow escape," explained Mr. Sharp. "What in the world can those people be up to, anyhow?" End of chapter. Tom Swift and His Airship by Victor Appleton. Chapter 16, Over a Fiery Furnace. Down below, the aeronauts could see the crowd, led by the police, scurrying to and fro. Many individuals besides the officers appeared to be holding weapons, and from the puffs of smoke that spurted out it was evident that more shots were being fired. But the bullets could do no harm, and the Red Cloud, under the force of the rapidly revolving propellers, was soon beyond the center of the city. "Well, if that isn't the limit!" cried Tom. "They must have taken us for a German war balloon about to drop explosives on them." "Bless my liver!" ejaculated Mr. Damon. "I believe you're right, eh, Mr. Sharp?" The veteran balloonist took a careful look over the craft before replying. Then he spoke. "It couldn't be that," and he shook his head as if puzzled. "They would know no foreign airship would try any trick like that. Besides, if by some remote possibility they did imagine it, there would be soldiers shooting at us instead of the police. As it was, the whole population seemed anxious to bring us down." "And they nearly did," added Mr. Damon. "If they had shot a few holes in the gas bag, where would we be?" "Right in the air," answered the balloonist. "It would take several volleys of bullets to damage our aluminum container. It is in sections, and when one, or even 5 compartments for that matter, are pierced, there is enough gas in the others to sustain us. So they could not have damaged us much, even if they had shot a lot of holes in us. Even without the gas container, we can keep aloft by constantly moving, for the planes will serve their purposes. Of course, they could damage us, and maybe put some of our machinery out of business, and that would be a serious thing. But what puzzles me is why they fired at us at all. It couldn't be out of pure mischief, could it?" asked the young inventor. "Hardly. If we were in a savage country I could understand the natives firing at some such object as this airship. But the people of that city must have known what our craft was. They probably have read something about it in the newspapers. And to deliberately fire on us, with the chance of disabling us, seems worse than barbarous." "Well, we won't give them another opportunity," commented Mr. Damon. "No, indeed. Not this city, but who knows but what the example may spread? We may be fired at the next town we sail over." "Well, then steer clear of the towns," advised Tom. "Possible we must pass over some, but I'd like to solve this mystery." The day passed without further incident, though they did not go low enough down over any city to drop any messages. It was decided that it would not be safe. "We'll take a chance at night," suggested Tom, and that evening, approaching a good-sized town in the dusk, several of the weighted envelopes were dropped overboard. Doubtless persons walking along the street, who were startled by hearing something fall with a thud at their feet, were much startled to look up and see dimly a great ghostly shape moving in the air. But there was no shooting, and eventually some of the messages reached Mr. Swift in Shopton. But he could not answer them, for the airship kept on the move. The night was spent floating in the air, with the engines stopped, and the Red Cloud floating lazily this way and that as the gentle winds shifted. For it was calm. The anchorage, if such it may be called, was above a sparsely settled part of the country, and if the lights of the airship were seen from below, the farmers doubtless took them for some new stars, or possibly a comet. "Now then, for a fast straight run," cried Tom, after breakfast had been served and the big motor with its 20 cylinders started. "We'll be able to make the turn today and then make for home, won't we, Mr. Sharp?" "Well, we could do it, Tom," was the answer, "but I like this mode of traveling so that I think I'll lengthen the voyage. Instead of turning at Atlanta, what do you say to making for Key West and then starting back? That will be something of a trip. The Red Cloud is behaving much better than I hoped she would." "I'm willing to go further if Mr. Damon is." "Oh, bless my shoestrings, I'm game!" exclaimed the eccentric man. "I always did want to go to Key West anyhow."
The craft was speeding along at a fast clip, and dinner that day was served about 3 miles in the air. Then, desiring to test the gliding abilities of the airship, it was sent down on a long slant, with the propeller stationary, the shifting planes and rudders alone guiding it. As the craft fairly slid down out of the sky like a sled on a bank of fleecy snow, Tom, who was peering ahead with his hand on the steering wheel, cried out, "Say, it looks as if we're going to run into a thunderstorm." "How's that?" inquired Mr. Sharp, poking his head from the motor compartment.
"He says there's a big storm ahead," repeated Mr. Damon, "and I guess he's right. I see a big bank of dark clouds, and there's a roaring in the air."
Mr. Sharp, who had been making some adjustments to the motor, went forward to take a look. The Red Cloud was swiftly gliding downward on a slant, straight toward a dark mass of vapor that seemed to be rolling first one way and then another, while, as Mr. Damon had said, there was a low rumbling proceeding from it. "That doesn't seem to be a thunderstorm," spoke the balloonist with a puzzled air. They all regarded the dark mass of vapor intently for a few seconds. Tom had brought the airship to a more level keel and was now spinning along under its own momentum, like a flat piece of tin scaled by some lead. But it was headed for the clouds, if such they were, though losing speed by degrees. "I'll have to start the motor," exclaimed Mr. Sharp. "We don't want to run into a storm, if we can help it, though I don't ever remember seeing a thunder disturbance like that." "Whew, it's getting warm," announced the youth, and he let go of the steering wheel for a moment while he took off his coat.
"That's what it is," agreed Mr. Damon, who also divested himself of his garments. "Bless my spark plug, but it's like a July day. No wonder there's a thunderstorm ahead."
Then Mr. Sharp uttered a cry. "That's no storm," he fairly shouted. "It's a big forest fire. That smoke we see. We must get out of this. Turn around, Tom, while I start the engine. We must rise above it." He fairly leaped for the motor, and Tom and Mr. Damon could hear him turning the levers and wheels, ready to start. But before the explosion came, something happened. There was a sound as of some great siren whistle blowing, and then, with a howl of the onrushing air, the Red Cloud, the propellers of which hung motionless on their shafts, was fairly sucked forward toward the fire, as the current sucks a boat over a waterfall. Start the motor, Mr. Sharp," cried Tom. "I'm trying to, but something seems to be the matter."
"We're being drawn right over the fire," yelled Mr. Damon. "It's getting hotter every minute. Can't you do something?"
"You take the wheel," called the balloonist to Mr. Damon. "Steer round, just as if it was an auto when we start the engine. Tom, come here and give me a hand. The motor's jammed." The young inventor sprang to obey. Mr. Damon, his face showing some of the fear he felt, grasped the steering wheel. The airship was now about a quarter of a mile high, but instead of resting motionless in the air, sustained by the gas in the container, she was being pulled forward, right toward the heart of the mass of black vapor, which, it could now be seen, was streaked with bright tongues of flame. "What's making us go ahead, if the motor isn't going?" asked Tom, as he bent over the machine, at which the aeronaut was laboring. "Suction, draft from the fire," explained Mr. Sharp. "Heated air rises and leaves the vacuum. The cold air rushes in. It's carrying us with it. We'll be right in the fire in a few minutes if we can't get started with this motor. I don't see what ails it. Can't we steer to one side as it is?" "No, we're right in a powerful current of air, and steering won't do any good until we have some motion of our own. Turn the gasoline lever on a little more and see if you can get a spark." Tom did so, but no explosion resulted. The 20 cylinders of the big engine remained mute. The airship, meanwhile, was gathering speed, sucked onward and downward, as it was from the draft from the fire. The roaring was plainer now, and the crackling of the flames could be heard plainly. The heat, too, grew more intense. Frantically, Tom and Mr. Sharp labored over the motor. With the perverseness usual to gas engines, it had refused to work at a critical moment.
"What shall I do?" cried Mr. Damon from his position in the pilot house. "We seem to be heading right for the midst of it."
"Slant the elevation rudder," called Tom. "Send the ship up. It will be cooler the higher we go. Maybe we can float over it." "You'd better go out there," advised Mr. Sharp. "I'll keep at this motor. Go up as high as you can. Turn on more gas. That will elevate us, but maybe not quick enough. The gas doesn't generate well in great heat. I'm afraid we're in for it," he added grimly. Tom sprang to relieve Mr. Damon. The heat was now intense. Nearer and nearer came the red cloud to the blazing forest, which seemed to cover several square miles. Great masses of smoke, with huge pieces of charred and blazing wood carried up by the great draught, circled around the ship. The red cloud was being pulled into the midst of the fire by the strong suction. Tom yanked over the elevation rudder, and the nose of the craft pointed upward, but it still moved downward, and a moment later the travelers of the air felt as if they were over a fiery furnace. End of chapter. Tom Swift and His Airship by Victor Appleton. Chapter 17. Wanted for robbery. Choking, gasping for breath, feeling as if they could not stand the intense heat more than a moment longer, the young inventor and his companions looked at each other. Death seemed ready to reach out and grasp them. The mass of heated air was so powerful that it swung and tossed the red cloud about as if it were a wisp of paper. "We must do something," cried Mr. Damon, beginning to take off his collar and vest. "I'm choking." "Lie down on the bottom of the car," suggested Mr. Sharp. "The smoke won't trouble you so much there." The eccentric man, too startled now to use any of his blessing expressions, did so. "Can't you start the motor?" asked Tom frantically, as he stuck to his post with his hand on the steering wheel, the elevation lever jammed back as far as it would go. "I've done my best," answered the balloonist, gasping as he swallowed some smoke. "I'm afraid it's all up with us. We should have steered clear of this from the first. My, how it roars!" The crackling and snapping of the flames below them as they fed upon the dry wood which no rain had wet for weeks was like the rush of some great cataract. Up swirled the dark smoke clouds, growing hotter and hotter, all the while as the craft came nearer and nearer to the center of the conflagration. "We must rise higher," cried Tom. "It's our only chance. Turn on the gas machine full power and fill a container. That will carry us up." "Yes, it's our only hope," muttered Mr. Sharp. "We must go up. But the trouble is the gas doesn't generate so fast when there's too much heat. We're bound to have to stay over this fiery pit for some time yet." "We're going up a little," spoke Tom hopefully as he glanced at a gauge near him. "We're 1,500 feet now, and we were only 12 a while ago. Good. Keep the elevation rudder as it is, and I'll see what I can do with the gas," advised the balloonist. "It's our only hope," and he hurried into the engine room, which, like the other parts of the cabin, was now murky with choking vapor and soot. Suddenly the elevation gauge showed that they were falling. The airship was going down. "What's the matter?" called Mr. Damon from the cabin floor. "I don't know," answered Tom, "unless the rudder is broken." He peered through the haze. No, the big elevation rudder was still in place, but it seemed to have no effect on the shim. "It's a downdraft," cried Mr. Sharp. "We've been sucked down. It won't last but a few seconds. I've been in them before." He seemed to have guessed rightly, for the next instant the airship was shooting upward again, and relief came to the aeronauts, though it was not much, for the heat was almost unbearable, and they had taken off nearly all their clothing. "Lighten ship," sung out Mr. Sharp. "Toss over all the things you think we can spare, Tom. Some of the cases of provisions. We can get more if we need 'em. We must rise, and the gas isn't generating fast enough." There was no need for the young inventor at the steering wheel now, for the craft simply could not be guided. It was swirled about, now this way, now that, by the currents of heated air. At times it would rise a considerable distance, only to be pulled down again, and just before Tom began to toss overboard some boxes of food, it seemed that the end had come, for the craft went down so low that the upward leaping tongues of flame almost reached the lower frame. "I'll help you," gasped Mr. Damon, and while he and Tom tossed from the cabin windows some of their stores, Mr. Sharp was frantically endeavoring to make the gas generate faster. It was slow work, but with the lightening of the ship their situation improved. Slowly, so slowly that it seemed an age, the elevation pointer went higher and higher on the dial. 1,600 feet, sung out Tom, pausing for a look at the gauge. "That's the best yet." The heat was felt less now, and every minute was improving the situation. Slowly the hand moved. The gas was being made in larger quantities now that the heat was less. 10 minutes more of agony and their danger was over. They were still above the burning area, but sufficiently high so that only stray wisps
of smoke enveloped them. "Whoa, but that was the worst ever," cried Tom, as he sank exhausted on a bench and wiped his perspiring face. "We sure were in a bad way." "I should say so," agreed Mr. Sharp. "And if we don't get a breeze we may have to stay here for some time." "Why can't you get the motor to work yet?" asked Mr. Damon. "Bless my gaiters, but I'm all in as it is, boys." "I'll have another try at the machine now," replied Mr. Sharp. "Probably it will work now after we're out of danger without the aid of it." His guess proved correct, for in a few minutes, with the aid of Tom, the motor started, the propellers revolved, and the Red Cloud was sent swiftly out of the fire zone. "Now we'd better take account of ourselves, our provisions, and the ship," said Mr. Sharp, when they had flown about 20 miles and were much refreshed by the cooler atmosphere. "I don't believe the craft is damaged any, except some of the braces may be warped by the heat. As for the provisions, you threw over a lot, didn't you, Tom?" "Well, I had to." "I guess you did. Well, we'll make a landing." "Do you think it will be safe?" asked Mr. Damon anxiously. "We might be fired upon again." "Oh, there's no danger of that. But I'll take precautions. I don't want a big crowd around when we come down, so we'll pick out a secluded place and land just at dusk. Then, in the morning, we can look over the ship and go to the nearest town to buy provisions. After that, we can continue our journey. And we'll steer clear of forest fires after this." "And people who shoot at us," added Mr. Damon. "Yes, I wish I knew what that was done for," and once again came that puzzled look to the face of the balloonist. The airship gently descended that evening in a large level field. A good landing being made just before the descent, Tom took an observation and located about 2 miles from the spot he selected for an anchorage, a good-sized village. "We can get provisions there," he announced. "Yes, but we must not let it be known what they're for," said Mr. Sharp, "or we'll have the whole population out here. I think this will be a good plan, Tom. You and Mr. Damon go into town and buy the things we need. I'll stay here with the airship and look it all over. You can arrange to have the stuff carted out here in the morning and left at a point, say, about a quarter of a mile away. Then we can carry it to the ship. In that way no one will discover us, and we'll not be bothered with curiosity seekers." This was voted a good idea, and when the landing had been made, and a hasty examination showed that the ship had suffered no great damage from the passage over the fire, the young inventor and Mr. Damon started off. They soon found a good road leading to town and tramped along it in the early evening. The few persons they met paid little attention to them, save to bow in a friendly fashion and occasionally wish them good evening. "I wonder where we are?" asked Tom as they hurried along. "In some southern town, to judge by the voices of the people," answered Mr. Damon. "Let's ask," suggested Tom. "No, if you do they'll know we're strangers, and they may ask a lot of questions." "Oh, I guess if it's a small place they'll know we're strangers soon enough," commented Tom. "But when we get to the village itself we can read the name on the store windows." A few minutes later found them in the midst of a typical southern town. It was Bartow, North Carolina, according to the signs they saw. "Here's a restaurant," called Tom, as they passed a neat-appearing one. "Let's go inside and get some supper before we buy our supplies." "Good," exclaimed Mr. Damon. "Bless my flapjacks, but I'm beginning to feel hungry." The eating place was a good one, and Tom's predictions about their being taken for strangers was verified. For no sooner had they given their orders than the pretty girl who waited on the table remarked, "I reckon you all are from the North, aren't you?" She smiled as she spoke, and Tom smiled back as he acknowledged it. "Have you a paper or newspaper I could look at?" he asked. "I guess I could find one," went on the girl. "I reckon you all are from New York, and New Yorkers are so desperate bent on reading the news." "Yes, we're from a part of New York," was Tom's reply. When a newspaper was brought to him, after they had nearly finished their meal, the young inventor rapidly scanned the pages. Something on the front sheet, under a heading of big black type, caught his eye. He started as he read it. "Wanted for robbery. Bank looters escape in red airship. Fired at, but disappear." "Great Jehoshaphat!" exclaimed Tom in a low voice. "What on earth can this mean?" "What?" inquired Mr. Damon. "Has anything happened?" "Happened? I should say there had," was the answer.
Why, we're accused of having robbed the Shopton Bank of $75,000 the night before we left, and to have taken it away in the Red Cloud. There's a general alarm out for us. Why, this is awful."
"It's preposterous," burst out Mr. Damon. "I'll have my lawyers sue this paper. Bless my stocks and bonds,
"Hush! Not so loud," cautioned Tom, for the pretty waitress was watching them curiously. "Here, read this, and then we'll decide what to do. But one thing is certain. We must go back to Shopton at once to clear ourselves of this accusation."
"Huh," murmured Mr. Damon, as he read the article rapidly. "Now I know why they fired at us. They hoped to bring us down, capture us, and get the $5,000 reward."
End of chapter. Tom Swift and His Airship by Victor Appleton. Chapter 18. Back for Vindication. Tom glanced around the restaurant. There were few persons in it save himself and Mr. Damon. The pretty waitress was still regarding the two curiously. "We'll have to take the paper along with us to show Mr. Sharp," said Tom in a low voice to his friend. "I haven't had time to take it all in myself yet. Let's go. I've had enough to eat, haven't you?"
"Yes, my appetite is gone now."
As they rose to pay their checks, the girl advanced. "Can you tell me where I can get a copy of this paper?" asked Tom, as he laid down a generous tip on the table for the girl. Her eyes opened rather wide. "You all are forgetting some of your money," she said, in her broad Southern tones. Tom thought her the prettiest girl he had ever seen, excepting Mary Nestor. "Oh, that's for you," replied the young inventor. "It's a tip. Aren't you in the habit of getting them down here?"
"Not very often, thank you all."
"But what did you all ask about that paper?" "I asked where I could get a copy of it. There is something in it that interests me."
"Yes, and I reckon I knows what it is,"
exclaimed the girl.
"It's about that airship with the robbers in it."
"How do you know?" inquired Tom quickly, and he tried to seem cool, though he felt the hot blood mounting in his cheeks.
"Oh, I saw you all reading it. Everybody down here is crazy about it. We all think the ship is coming down this way, 'cause it says the robbers was intending to start south before they robbed the bank. I wish I could collect that $5,000. If I could see that airship, I wouldn't work no more in this eating place. What do you all reckon that airship looks like?"
And the girl gazed intently at Tom and Mr. Damon.
"Bless my—"
began the eccentric man, but Tom broke in hurriedly. "Oh, I guess it looks like most any other airship," for he feared that if his companion used any of his odd expressions he might be recognized, since our hero had not had time to read the article in the paper through, and was not sure whether or not a description of himself, Mr. Damon, and Mr. Sharp was given.
"Well, I sure wish I could collect that reward," went on the girl. "Everybody is out on the lookout. You all ain't seen the airship, have you all?"
"Where can we get a paper like this?" asked Tom again, not wanting to answer such a leading question.
"Why, you all is sure welcome to that one," was the reply. "I guess I can afford to give it to you all, after the generous way you all behaved to me. Take it and welcome. But are you all sure you're done eating? You left lots."
"Oh, we had enough," replied Tom hurriedly. His sole aim now was to get away, to consult with Mr. Sharp, and he needed the paper to learn further details of the astonishing news. He and his friend accused of looting the bank and taking away $75,000 in the airship? It was incredible. A reward of $5,000 offered for the capture? They might be arrested any minute. Yet they could not go on without buying some provisions. What were they to do? Once outside the restaurant, Mr. Damon and Tom walked swiftly on. They came to a corner where there was a street lamp, and there the young inventor paused to scan the paper again. It was the copy of a journal published in the nearby county seat, and contained quite a full account of the affair. The story was told of how the bank had been broken into, the vault rifled, and the money taken. The first clue, it said, was given by a youth named Andy Foger, who had seen a former acquaintance hanging around the bank with burglar tools.
Tom recognized the description of himself as the former acquaintance, but he could not understand the rest. Burglar tools? I wonder how Andy could say that, he asked Mr. Damon.
Wait until we get back and we'll ask John Sharp, suggested his companion. This is very strange. I am going to sue someone for spreading false reports about me. Bless my ledgers. Why, I have money on deposit in that bank. To think that I would rob it.
Poor Dad, murmured Tom. This must be hard for him. But what about ordering food? Maybe if we buy any they will trail us, find the airship and capture it. I don't want to be arrested even if I am innocent, and I certainly don't want the airship to fall into the hands of the police. They might damage it.
We must go to see Mr. Sharp, declared Mr. Damon, and back to where the Red Cloud was concealed they went. To say that the balloonist was astonished is putting it mildly. He was even more excited than was Mr. Damon. "Wait until I get hold of that Andy Foger," he cried. "I'll make him sweat for this. I see he's already laid claim to the reward," he added, reading further along in the article. "He thinks he has put the police on our trail." "So he seems to have done," added Tom. "The whole country has been notified to look out for us. The paper says we're likely to be fired upon whenever we pass over a city or a town." "Then we'll have to avoid them," declared the balloonist. "But we must go back," declared Tom. "Of course, but to be vindicated, we'll have to give up our trip. My. But this is a surprise." "I don't see what makes Andy say he saw me with the burglar tools," commented Tom with a puzzled air. Mr. Sharp thought for a moment, then he exclaimed, "It was that bag of tools I sent you after, the long wrenches, the pliers, and the brace and bits. You—" "Of course," cried Tom. "I remember now. The bag dropped and opened, and Andy and Sam saw the tools. But the idea of taking them for burglar tools!" "Well, I suppose the burglars, whoever they were, did use tools similar to those to break open the vault," put in Mr. Damon. "And he probably thought he was a smart lad to put police on our track."
"I'll put him on the track when I return," declared Mr. Sharp. "Well, now, what's to be done?" "We've got to have food," suggested Tom. "Yes, but I think we can manage that. I've been looking over the ship as best I could in the dark. Seems to be all right. We can start early in the morning without anyone around here knowing we paid their town a visit. You and Mr. Damon go back to town, Tom, and order some stuff. Have the man leave it by the roadside early tomorrow morning. Tell him it's for some travelers who will stop and pick it up. Pay him well, and tell him to keep quiet, as it's for a racing party. That's true enough. We're going to race home to vindicate our reputations. I think that will be all right."
"Men may get suspicious,"
said Mr. Damon. "I hope not," answered the balloonist. "We've got to take a chance anyhow." The plan worked well, however, the storekeeper promising to have the supplies on hand at the time and place mentioned. He winked as Tom asked him to keep quiet about it. "Oh, I know your automobile fellows," he said with a laugh. "You want to get some grub on the fly, and so you won't have to stop and can beat the other fella. I know you, for I see them automobile goggles sticking out of your pocket." Tom and Mr. Damon each had a pair to use when the wind was strong, but the young inventor had forgotten about his. They now served him a good turn, for they turned the thoughts of the storekeeper into a new channel. The lad let it go at that, and paying for such things as he and Mr. Damon could not carry, left the store. The aeronauts passed an uneasy night. They raised their ship high in the air, anchoring it by a rope fast to a big tree, and they turned on no lights, for they did not want to betray their position. They descended before it was yet daylight, and a little later hurried to the place where the provisions were left. They found their supplies safely on hand, and carrying them into the airship, prepared to turn back to Shopton. As the ship rose high in the air, a crowd of laborers passing through a distant field saw it. At once they raised a commotion, shouting and pointing to the wonderful sight. "We're discovered!" cried Tom. "No matter," answered Mr. Sharp. "We'll soon be out of sight, and we'll fly high the rest of this trip."
Tom looked down on the fast disappearing little hamlet and thought of the pretty girl in the restaurant. End of chapter. Tom Swift and His Airship by Victor Appleton. Chapter 19. Wrecked. With her nose headed north, the Red Cloud swung along through the air. Those on board were thinking of many things, but chief among them was the unjust accusation that had been made against them by an irresponsible boy, the red-haired Andy Foger. They read the account in the paper again, seeking to learn from it new things at each perusal. "It's just a lot of circumstantial evidence, that's what it is," said Tom. "I admit it might look suspicious to anyone who didn't know us, but Andy Foger has certainly done the most mischief by his conclusions. Burglar tools, the idea." "I think I shall sue the bank for damages," declared Mr. Damon. "They've injured my reputation by making this accusation against me. Anyhow, I'll certainly never do any more business with them, and I'll withdraw my $10,000 deposit as soon as we get back." "Mr. Sharp doesn't seem to be accused of anything at all," remarked Tom, reading the article for perhaps the 10th time. "Oh, I guess I'm sort of a general all-around bad man who helped you burglars to escape with the booty," answered the balloonist with a laugh. "I expect to be arrested along with you, too." "But must we be arrested?" inquired Tom anxiously. "I don't like that idea at all. We haven't done anything." "This is my plan," went on Mr. Sharp. "We'll get back to Shopton as quickly as we can. We'll arrive at night so no one will see us, and, leaving the airship in some secluded spot, we'll go to the police and explain matters. We can easily prove that we had nothing to do with the robbery. Why, we were all at home the night it happened. Mr. Swift, Mr. Jackson, and Mrs. Packard can testify to that." "Yes," agreed Mr. Damon. "I guess they can, bless my bank book. But that seems a good plan. We'll follow it." Proceeding on the plan which they had decided was the best one, the Red Cloud was sent high into the air. So high up was it that at times it was above the clouds. Though this caused some little discomfort at first, especially to Mr. Damon, he soon became used to it, as did the others, and it had the advantage of concealing them from the persons below who might be on the lookout. "For we don't want to be shot at again," explained Mr. Sharp. "It isn't altogether healthy and not very safe. If we keep high up they can't see us, much less shoot at us. They'll take us for some big bird. Then, too, we can go faster." "I suppose there will be another alarm sent out for those workers having sighted us," ventured Tom. "Oh, yes, but those fellows were so excited they may describe us as having horns, hooves, and a tail, and their story may not be believed. I'm not worrying about them. My chief concern is to drive the Red Cloud for all she is worth. I want to explain some things back there in Shopton." As if repenting of the way it had misbehaved over the forest fire, the airship was now swinging along at a rapid rate. Seated in the cabin, the travelers would have really enjoyed the return trip had it not been for the accusation hanging over them. The weather was fine and clear, and as they skimmed along, now and then coming out of the clouds, they caught glimpses below them of the earth above which they were traveling. They had a general idea of their location from knowing the town where the paper had given them such astounding news, and it was easy to calculate their rate of progress. After running about 100 miles or so at high speed, Mr. Sharp found it necessary to slow down the motor, as some of the new bearings were heating. Still, this gave them no alarm, as they were making good time. They came to a stop that night and calculated that by the next evening, or two at the latest, they would be back in Shopton. But they did not calculate on an accident. One of the cylinders on the big motor cracked as they started up next morning, and for some hours they had to hang in the air, suspended by the gas in the container, while Mr. Sharp and Tom took out the damaged part and put in a spare one, the cylinders being cast separately. It was dusk when they finished, and too late to start up, so they remained about in the same place until the next day. Morning dawned with hot humidities, unusual at that time of the year, but partly accounted for by the fact they were still within the influence of the southern climate.
With a whiz, the big propellers were set in motion, and with Tom at the wheel, the ship being about 3 miles in the air, to which height it had risen after the repairs were made, the journey was recommenced. "It's cooler up here than down below," remarked Tom, as he shifted the wheel and rudder a bit in response to a gust of wind that heeled the craft over. "Yes, I think we're going to have a storm," remarked Mr. Sharp, eyeing the clouds with a professional air. "We may run ahead of it or right into it. We'll go down a bit toward night, when there's less danger of being shot." So far on their return trip, they had not been low enough in the daytime to be in any danger from the persons who hoped to earn the $5,000 reward. The afternoon passed quickly, and it got dark early. There was a curious hum to the wind, and hearing it, Mr. Sharp began to go about the ship, seeing that everything was fast and taut. "We're going to have a blow," he remarked, "and a heavy one, too. We'll have to make everything snug, and be ready to go up or down as the case calls for." "Up or down?" inquired Mr. Damon. "Yes, by rising we may escape the blow, or by going below the strata of agitated air we may escape it." "How about rain?" "Well, you can get above rain, but you can't get below it, with the law of gravitation working as it does at present. How's the gas generator, Tom?" "Seems to be all right," replied the young inventor, who had relinquished the wheel to the balloonist. They ate an early supper, and hardly had the dishes been put away when, from the west, where there was a low-flying bank of clouds, there came a mutter of thunder. A little later there was a dull red illumination amid the rolling masses of vapor. "There's the storm, and she's heading right this way," commented Mr. Sharp. "Can't you avoid it?" asked Mr. Damon anxiously. "I could if I knew how high it was, but I guess we'll wait and see how it looks as we get closer." The airship was flying on, and the storm, driven by a mighty wind, was rushing to meet it. Already there was a sighing, moaning sound in the wire and wooden braces of the Red Cloud. Suddenly there came such a blast that it heeled the ship over on her side. "Shift the equilibrium rudders," shouted Mr. Sharp to Tom, turning the wheel and various levers over to the lad. "I'm going to get more speed out of the motor." Tom acted just in time, and after bobbing about like a cork on the water, the ship was righted and sent forging ahead, under the influence of the propellers working at top speed. Nor was this any too much, for it needed all the power of the big engine to even partially overcome the force of the wind that was blowing right against the Red Cloud. Of course, they might have turned and flown before it, but they wanted to go north, not south. They wanted to face their accusers. Then, after the first fury of the blast had spent itself, there came a deluge of rain, following a dazzling glare of lightning and a bursting crash of thunder. In spite of the gale buffeting her, the airship was making good progress. The skill of Tom and the balloonist was never shown to better advantage. All around them the storm raged, but through it the craft kept on her way. Nothing could be seen but pelting sheets of water and swirling mist, yet onward the ship was driven. The thunder was deafening, and the lightning nearly blinded them until the electrics were switched on, flooding the cabin with radiance. Inside the car they were snug and dry, though the pitching of the craft was like that of a big liner in a trough of the ocean waves. "Will she weather it, do you think?" called Mr. Damon in the ear of Mr. Sharp, shouting so as to be heard above the noise of the elements and hum of the motor. The balloonist nodded. "She's a good ship," he answered proudly. Hardly had he spoken when there came a crash louder than any that had preceded, and the flash of rosy light that accompanied it seemed to set the whole heavens on fire. At the same time there was a violent shock to the ship. "We're hit, struck by lightning!" yelled Tom. "We're falling!" cried Mr. Damon an instant later. Mr. Sharp looked at the elevation gauge. The hand was slowly swinging around. Down, down dropped the Red Cloud. She was being roughly treated by the storm. "I'm afraid we're wrecked," said the balloonist in a low voice, scarcely audible above the roar of the tempest. Following the great crash had come a comparatively light bombardment from the sky artillery. "Use the gliding rudder, Tom," called Mr. Sharp a moment later. "We may fall, but we'll land as easily as possible."
The wind, the rain, the lightning and thunder continued. Down, down sank the ship. Its fall was somewhat checked by the rudder Tom swung into place, and by setting the planes at a different angle. The motor had been stopped, and the propellers no longer revolved. In the confusion and darkness it was not safe to run ahead, with the danger of colliding with unseen objects on the earth. They tried to peer from the windows, but could see nothing. A moment later, as they stared at each other with fear in their eyes, there came a shock. The ship trembled from end to end. "We've landed," cried Tom, as he yanked back on the levers. The airship came to a stop. "Now to see where we are," said Mr. Sharp grimly, "and how badly we are wrecked." End of chapter. Tom Swift and His Airship by Victor Appleton. Chapter 20. Tom Gets a Clue. Out of the cabin of the now stationary airship hurried the three travelers, out into the pelting rain which was lashed into their faces by the strong wind. Tom was the first to emerge. "We're on something solid," he cried, stamping his feet. "A rock, I guess." "Gracious, I hope we're not on a rock in the midst of a river," exclaimed Mr. Damon. "Bless my soul, though, the water seems to be running around my ankles." "There's enough rain to make water run almost up to our necks," called Mr. Sharp above the noise of the storm. "Tom, can you make out where we are?" "Not exactly. Is the ship all right?" "I can't see very well, but there appears to be a hole in the gas container, a big one, too, or we wouldn't have fallen so quickly." The plight of the travelers of the air was anything but enviable. They were wet through, for it needed only a few minutes' exposure to the pelting storm to bring this about. They could not tell in the midst of the darkness where they were, and they almost feared to move for fear they might be on top of some rock or precipice, over which they might tumble if they took a false step. "Let's get back inside the ship," proposed Mr. Damon. "It's warm and dry there. At all events, bless my umbrella, I don't know when I've been so wet." "I'm not going in until I find out where we are," declared Tom. "Wait a minute, and I'll go in and get an electric flash lantern. That will show us," for the lightning had ceased with the great crash that seemed to have wrecked the Red Cloud. The rain still kept up, however, and there was a distant muttering of thunder, while it was so black that had not the lights in the cabin of the airship been faintly glowing, they could hardly have found the craft had they moved 10 feet away from it. Tom soon returned with the portable electric lamp, operated by dry batteries. He flashed it on the surface of where they were standing and uttered an exclamation. "We're on a roof!" he cried. "A roof!" repeated Mr. Damon. "Yes, the roof of some large building. And what you thought was a river is the rainwater running off it. See?" The young inventor held the light down so his companions could observe the surface of that upon which the airship rested. There was no doubt of it. They were on top of a large building. "If we're on a roof, we must be in the midst of a city," objected Mr. Damon. "But I can't see any lights around, and we would see them if we were in a city, you know." "Maybe the storm put the lights out of business," suggested Mr. Sharp. "That often occurs." "I know one way we can find out for certain," went on Tom. "How?" "Start up our search lamp and play it all around. We can't make sure how large this roof is in the dark, and it's risky trying to trace the edges by walking around." "Yes, and it would be risky to start our searchlight going," objected Mr. Sharp. "People would see it, and there'd be a crowd up here in less than no time, storm or no storm. No, we've got to keep dark until I can see what's the matter. We must leave here before daylight." "Suppose we can't?" asked Mr. Damon. "Crowds will be sure to see us then anyhow." "I'm pretty sure we can get away," was the opinion of the balloonist. "Even if our gas container is so damaged that it will not sustain us, we are still an airplane, and the roof being flat will make a good place to start from. No, we can leave as soon as this storm lets up a little." "Then I'm going to have a look and find out what sort of a building this is," declared Tom, and while Mr. Sharp began a survey, as well as he could in the dark, of the airship, the young inventor proceeded cautiously to ascertain the extent of the roof. The rain was not coming down quite so hard now, and Tom found it easier to see. Mr. Damon, finding he could do nothing to help, went back into the cabin, blessing himself and his various possessions at the queer predicament in which they found themselves.
Flashing his light every few seconds, Tom walked on until he came to one edge of the roof. It was very large, as he could judge by the time it took him to traverse it. There was a low parapet at the edge. He peered over, and an expanse of dark wall met his eyes. We must have come to one side, he reasoned. I want to get to the front. Then maybe I can see a sign that will tell me what I want to know. The lad turned to the left, and presently came to another parapet. It was higher, and ornamented with terracotta bricks. This evidently was the front. As Tom peered over the edge of the little raised ledge, there flashed out below him hundreds of electric lights. The city illuminating plant was being repaired. Then Tom saw, flashing below him, one of those large signs made of incandescent lights. It was in front of the building, and as soon as our hero saw the words he knew where the airship had landed. For what he read as he leaned over was this: Middleville Arcade. Tom gave a cry. "What's the matter?" called Mr. Sharp. "I've discovered something," answered Tom, hurrying to his friend. "We're on top of the Middleville Arcade building." "What does that mean?" "It means that we're not very far from home, and in the midst of a fairly large city. But it means more than that." "What?" demanded the balloonist, struck by an air of excitement about the lad, for as Tom stood in the subdued glow of the lights from one of the airship's cabin windows, all the others having been darkened as the storm slackened, his eyes shone brightly. "This is the building where Anson Morse, one of the gang that robbed Dad, once had an office," went on Tom eagerly. "That was brought out in the trial, and it's the place where they used to do some of their conspiring. Maybe some of that crowd are here now, laying low." "Well, if they are, we don't want anything to do with that gang," said Mr. Sharp. "We can't arrest them. Besides, I've found out that our ship is all right after all. We can proceed as soon as we like. There is only a small leak in the gas container. It was the generator machine that was put out of business by the lightning, and I've repaired it. I want to see if I can get any trace of the rascals. Maybe I could learn something from the janitor of the arcade about them. The janitor is probably here." "But why do you want to get any information about that gang?" "Because," answered Tom, and as Mr. Damon at the moment started to come from the cabin of the airship, the lad leaped forward and whispered the remainder of the sentence into the ear of the balloonist. "You don't mean it!" exclaimed Mr. Sharp in a tense whisper. Tom nodded vigorously. "But how can you enter the building?" asked the other. "You can't drop over the edge." "Down the scuttle," answered Tom. "There must be one on the roof, for they have to come up here at times. We can force the lock if necessary. I want to enter the building and see where Morse had his office." "All right, go ahead. I'll engage Mr. Damon here so he won't follow you. It will be great news for him. Go ahead." Under the pretense of wanting the help of the eccentric man in completing the repairs he had started, Mr. Sharp took Mr. Damon back into the cabin. Tom, getting a big screwdriver from an outside toolbox, approached the scuttle on the roof. He could see it looming up in the semi-darkness, a sort of box, covering a stairway that led down into the building. The door was locked, but Tom forced it, and felt justified. A few minutes later, cautiously flashing his light, almost like a burglar, he thought, he was prowling around the corridors of the office structure. Was it deserted? That was what he wanted to know. He knew the office Morse had formerly occupied was 2 floors from the top. Tom descended the staircase, trying to think up some excuse to offer in case he met with the watchman or janitor. But he encountered no one. As he reached the floor where he knew Morse and his gang were wont to assemble, he paused and listened. First he heard nothing. Then, as the sound of the storm became less, he fancied he heard the murmur of voices. "Suppose it should be some of them," whispered Tom. He went forward, pausing at almost every other step to listen. The voices became louder. Tom was now nearly at the office where Morse had once had his quarters. Now he could see it, and his heart gave a great thump as he noticed that the place was lighted. The lad could read the name on the door. Industrial Development Company. That was the name of a fake concern headed by Morse. As our hero looked, he saw the shadows of 2 men thrown on the ground glass. "Someone's in there," he whispered to himself. He could now hear the voices much plainer. They came from the room, but the lad could not distinguish them as belonging to any of the gang with whom he had come in contact. and who had escaped from jail. A low murmur went on for several seconds. The listener could make out no words. Suddenly the low, even rumble was broken. Someone cried out, "There's got to be a divvy soon. There's no use letting Morse hold that whole 75,000 any longer. I'm going to get what's coming to me, or—" "Hush!" someone else cried. "Be quiet." "No, I won't. I want my share. I've waited long enough. If I don't get what's coming to me inside of a week, I'll go to Shagman myself and make Morse whack up. I helped on the job, and I want my money." "Will you be quiet?" pleaded another, and at that instant Tom heard someone's hand on the knob. The door opened a crack, letting out a pencil of light. The men were evidently coming out. The young inventor did not wait to hear more. He had a clue now, and running on tiptoes, he made his way to the staircase and out of the scuttle on the roof. End of chapter. Tom Swift and His Airship by Victor Appleton. Chapter 21. On the Trail. "What's the matter, Tom?" asked Mr. Sharp as the lad came hurrying along the roof, having taken the precaution to fasten the scuttle door as well as he could. "You seem excited. So would you if you had heard what I did." "What? You don't mean that some of the gang is down there?" "Yes, and what's more, I'm on the trail of the thieves who robbed the Shopton Bank of the $75,000. "No, you don't mean it." "I certainly do." "Then we'd better tell Mr. Damon. He's in the cabin." "Of course I'll tell him. He's as much concerned as I am. He wants to be vindicated. Isn't it great luck, though?" "But you haven't landed the men yet. Do you mean to say that the same gang, the Happy Harry crowd, robbed the bank?" "I think so, from what I heard. But come inside and I'll tell you all about it." "Suppose we start the ship first. It's ready to run. There wasn't as much the matter with it as I feared. The storm is over now, and we'll be safer up in the air than on this roof. Did you get all the information you could?" "All I dared to. The men were coming out, so I had to run. They were quarreling, and when that happens among thieves—" "Why, honest men get their dues. Everyone knows that proverb," interrupted Mr. Damon, again emerging from the cabin. "Bless my quotation marks, I should think you'd have something better to do than stand there talking proverbs." "We have," replied Mr. Sharp quickly. "We're going to start the ship, and then we have some news for you. Tom, you take the steering wheel, and I'll start the gas machine. We'll rise to some distance before starting the propellers, and then we won't create any excitement." "But what news are you going to tell me?" asked Mr. Damon. "Bless my very existence, but you get me all excited, and then you won't gratify my curiosity." "In a little while we will," responded Mr. Sharp. "Lively now, Tom. Someone may see this airship on top of the building, as it's getting so much lighter now after the storm." The outburst of the elements was almost over, and Tom, taking another look over the edge of the roof, could see persons moving about in the street below. The storm clouds were passing, and a faint haze showed where a moon would soon make its appearance, thus disclosing the craft so oddly perched upon the roof. There was need for haste. Fortunately, the Red Cloud could be set aloft without the use of the propellers, for the gas would serve to lift her. It had been found that lightning had struck the big red aluminum container, but the shock had been a comparatively slight one, and as the tank was insulated from the rest of the ship, no danger resulted to the occupants. A rent was made in 2 or 3 of the gas compartments, but the others remained intact, and when an increased pressure of the vapor was used, the ship was almost as buoyant as before. Into the cabin the 3 travelers hurried, dripping water at every step, for there was no time to change clothes. Then, with Tom and Mr. Sharp managing the machinery, the craft slowly rose. It was well that they had started, for when a few hundred feet above the roof, the moon suddenly shone from behind a bank of clouds, and would most certainly have revealed their position to persons in the street. As it was, several were attracted by the sight of some great object in the air. They called the attention of others to it, but by the time glasses and telescopes had been brought to bear, the Red Cloud was far away. "Dry clothes now, some hot drinks, and then Tom will tell us his secret," remarked Mr. Sharp, and with the great ship swaying high above the city of Middleville, Tom told what he had heard in the office building. "They are the thieves who looted the bank and caused us to be unjustly accused," he finished. If we capture them, we'll get the reward, and turn a neat trick on Andy Foger and his cronies." "But how can you capture them?" asked Mr. Damon. "You don't know where they are." "Perhaps not where Morse and the men who have the money are, but I have a plan. It's this. We'll go to some quiet place, leave the airship, and then inform the authorities of our suspicions. They can come here and arrest the men who still seem to be hanging out in Morse's office. Then we can get on the trail of this Shagmon, who seems to be the person in authority this time, though I never heard of him before. He seems to have the money, according to what one of the men in the office said, and he's the man we want." "Shagmon!" exclaimed Mr. Damon. "Yes, Shagmon. The fellow I heard talking said he'd go to Shagmon and make Morse whack up. Shagmon may be the real head of the gang." "Ah, I have it!" cried Mr. Damon suddenly. "I wonder I didn't think of it before. Shagmon is the headquarters, not the head of the gang." "What do you mean?" asked Tom, much excited. "I mean there's a town called Shagmon about 50 miles from here. That's what the fellow in the office meant. He is going to the town of Shagmon and make Morse whack up. That's where Morse is. That's where the gang is hiding. That's where the money is. Hurrah, Tom, we're on the trail."
End of chapter. Tom Swift and His Airship by Victor Appleton. Chapter 22. The Sheriff on Board. The announcement of Mr. Damon came as a great surprise to Tom and Mr. Sharp. They had supposed that the reference to Shagmon was to a person, and never dreamed that it was to a locality, but Mr. Damon's knowledge of geography stood them in good stead. "Well, what's the first thing to do?" asked Tom after a pause. "The first thing would be to go to Shagmon, or close to it, I should say," remarked Mr. Sharp. "In what direction is it, Mr. Damon?" "Northwest from where we were. It's a county seat, and that will suit our plans admirably, for we can call on the sheriff for help." "That is, if we can locate the gang," put in Tom. "I fancy it will be no easy job, though. How are we going about it?" "Let's first get to Shagmon," suggested the balloonist. "We'll select some quiet spot for a landing, and then talk matters over. We may stumble on the gang, just as you did, Tom, on the men in the office." "No such good luck, I'm afraid." "Well, I think we'll all be better for a little sleep," declared the eccentric man. "Bless my eyelids, but I'm tired out." As there was no necessity for standing watch when the airship was so high up as to be almost invisible, they all turned in, and were soon sleeping soundly, though Tom had hard work at first to compose himself, for he was excited at the prospect of capturing the scoundrels, recovering the money for the bank, and clearing his good name, as well as those of his friends. In the morning, careful calculations were made to enable the travelers to tell when they had reached a point directly over the small city of Shagmon, and, with the skill of the veteran balloonist to aid them, this was accomplished. The airship was headed in the proper direction, and about 10 o'clock, having made out by using a telescope that there was plenty of uninhabited land about the city, the craft was sent aloft again, out of a large crowd that had caught sight of it, for it was the intention of the travelers not to land until after dark, as they wanted to keep their arrival quiet. There were two reasons for this. One was that the whole country was eager to arrest them, to claim the reward offered by the bank, and they did not want this to happen. The other reason was that they wanted to go quietly into town, tell the sheriff their story, and enlist his aid. All that day the Red Cloud consorted with the masses of fleecy vapor several miles above the earth, a position being maintained, as nearly as could be judged by instruments, over a patch of woodland where Mr. Sharp had decided to land. As there were several large clearings in it, back and forth above the clouds, out of sight, the airship drifted lazily to and fro, sometimes, when she got too far off her course, being brought back to the right spot by means of the propellers. It was tedious waiting, but they felt it was the only thing to do. Mr. Sharp and Tom busied themselves making adjustments to several parts of apparatus that needed it. Nothing could be done toward repairing the hole in the aluminum container until a shop or shed was reached, but the ship really did not need these repairs to enable it to be used. Mr. Damon was fretful and blessed so many things during the course of the day that there seemed to be nothing left. Dinner and supper took up some time, really good meals being served by Tom, who was temporarily acting as cook. Then they anxiously waited for darkness, when they could descend. "I hope the moon isn't too bright," remarked Mr. Sharp, as they went carefully over the motor once more, for he did not want it to balk again. "If it shines too much, it will discover us." "But a little light would be a fine thing, and show us a good place to land," argued Tom. Fortune seemed to be in favor of the adventurers. There was a hazy light from the moon, which was covered by swiftly moving dark clouds. Now and then a most effective screen for the airship, as its great moving shape, viewed from the earth, resembled nothing so much as one of the clouds. They made a good landing in a little forest glade, the craft, under the skillful guidance of Mr. Sharp and Tom, coming down nicely. "Now for a trip to town to notify the sheriff," said Mr. Sharp. "Tom, I think you had better go alone. You can explain matters, and Mr. Damon and I will remain here until you come back. I should say what you had best do would be to go to the sheriff to help you locate the gang of bank robbers. They're in this vicinity, and he ought to be able, with his deputies, to find them." "I'll ask him," replied Tom as he set off. It was rather a lonely walk into the city from the woods where the airship had landed, but Tom did not mind it, and, reaching Shagmon, he inquired his way to the home of the sheriff, for it was long after office hours. He heard, as he walked along the streets, many persons discussing the appearance of the airship that morning, and he was glad they had planned to land after dark, for more than one citizen was regretting that he had not had a chance to get the $5,000 reward offered for the arrest of the passengers in the Red Cloud. Tom found the sheriff, Mr. Durkin, by name, a genial personage. At the mention of the airship the official grew somewhat excited. "Are you one of the fellows that looted the bank?" he inquired, when Tom told him how he and his friends had arrived at Shagmon. The young inventor denied the impeachment and told his story. He ended up with a request for the sheriff's aid, at the same time asking if the officer knew where such a gang as the Happy Harry one might be in hiding. "You've come at the right time, young man," was the answer of Sheriff Durkin, when he was assured of the honesty of Tom's statements. "I've been on the point for the last week of raiding a camp of men who have settled at a disused summer resort about 10 miles from here. I think they're running a gambling game, but I haven't been able to get any evidence, and every time I send out a posse someone warns the men, and we can find nothing wrong. I believe these men are the very ones you want. If we could only get to them without their suspecting it, I think I'd have them right." "We can do that, Sheriff." "How?" "Go in our airship. You come with us, and we'll put you right over their camp, where you can drop down on their heads." "Good land, I never rode in an automobile even, let alone an airship," went on the officer. "I'd be scared out of my wits, and so would my deputies." "Send the deputies on ahead," suggested Tom. The sheriff hesitated, then he slapped his thigh with his big hand. "By golly, I'll go, Hugh," he declared. "I'll try capturing criminals in an airship for the first time in my life. Lead the way, young man." An hour later Sheriff Durkin was aboard the Red Cloud, and plans were being talked of for the capture of the bank robbers, or at least for raiding the camp where the men were supposed to be. End of chapter. Tom Swift and His Airship by Victor Appleton. Chapter 23. On to the Camp. "Well, you sure have a fine craft here," remarked Sheriff Durkin, as he looked over the airship after Tom and his friends had told of their voyage. "It will be quite up to date to raid a gang of bank robbers in a flying machine, but I guess it will be the only way we can catch those fellows. Now I'll go back to town, and the first thing in the morning I'll round up my posse and start it off. The men can surround the camp and lay quiet until we arrive in this ship. Then, when we descend on the heads of the scoundrels right out of the sky, so to speak, my men can close in and bag them all." "That's a good plan," commented Mr. Sharp. "But are you sure these are the men we want? It's pretty vague, I think, but, of course, the clue Tom got is pretty slim. Merely the name Shagmon." "Well, this is Shagmon," went on the sheriff, And as I told your young friend, I've been trying for some time to bag the men at the summer camp. They number quite a few, and if they don't do anything worse, they run a gambling game there. I'm pretty sure if the bank robbers are in this vicinity, they're in that camp. Of course, all the men there may not have been engaged in looting the vault, and they may not all know of it, but it won't do any harm to round up the whole bunch." After a tour of the craft and waiting to take a little refreshment with his new friends, the sheriff left, promising to come as early on the morrow as possible. "Let's go to bed," suggested Mr. Sharp after a bit. "We've got hard work ahead of us tomorrow." They were up early, and in the seclusion of the little glade in the woods, Tom and Mr. Sharp went over every part of the airship. The sheriff arrived about 9 o'clock and announced that he had started off through the woods to surround the camp, 25 men. "They'll be there at noon," Mr. Durkin said, "and we'll close in when I give the signal, which will be 2 shots fired. I heard just before I came here that there are some new arrivals at the camp." "Maybe those are the men I overheard talking in the office building," suggested Tom. "They probably came to get their share. Well, we must swoop down on them before they have time to distribute the money." "That's what," agreed the county official. Mr. Durkin was even more impressed by the airship in the daytime than he had been at night. He examined every part, and when the time came to start he was almost as unconcerned as any of the 3 travelers who had covered many hundreds of miles in the air. "This certainly is great," cried the sheriff, as the airship rose swiftly under the influence of the powerful gas. As the craft went higher and higher, his enthusiasm grew. He was not the least afraid, but then Sheriff Durkin was accounted a nervy individual under all circumstances. "Lay her a little off to the left," the officer advised Tom, who was at the steering wheel. "The main camp is right over there. How long before we will reach it?" "We can get there in about 15 minutes if we run at top speed," answered the lad, his hand on the switch that controlled the motor. "Shall we?" "No use burning up the air. Besides, my men have hardly had time to surround the camp. It's in deep woods. If I were you, I'd get right over it, and then rise up out of sight so they can't see you. Then, when it's noon, you can go down. I'll fire the signal and the fun will commence. That is, fun for us, but not so much for those chaps, I fancy." And the sheriff smiled grimly. The sheriff's plan was voted a good one, and accordingly the ship, after nearing a spot about over the camp, was sent a mile or 2 into the air, hovering as nearly as possible over the spot. Shortly before 12, the sheriff, having seen to the weapons he brought with him, gave the signal to descend. Down shot the Red Cloud, dropping swiftly when the gas was allowed to escape from the red container, and also urged toward earth by the deflected rudder. "Are you all ready?" cried the sheriff, looking at his watch. "All ready," replied Mr. Sharp. "Then here goes," went on the officer, drawing his revolver and firing 2 shots in quick succession. 2 shots from the woods below answered him. Faster dropped the Red Cloud toward the camp of the criminals. End of chapter. Tom Swift and His Airship by Victor Appleton. Chapter 24. The Raid. "Look for a good place to land," cried Mr. Sharp to Tom. "Any small, level place will do. Turn on the gas full power as soon as you feel the first contact, and then shut it off, so as to hold her down. Then jump out and take a hand in the fight." "That's right," cried the sheriff. "Fight's the word. We're breaking from cover now," he added, as he looked over the side of the cabin from one of the windows. "The rascals have taken the alarm." The airship was descending toward a little glade in the woods surrounding the old picnic ground. Men, mostly of tramp sort, could be seen running to and fro. "I hope my deputies closed in promptly," murmured the sheriff. "There's a bigger bunch there than I counted on." From the appearance of the gang rushing about, it seemed as if there were at least 50 of them. Some of the fellows caught sight of the airship, and with yells pointed upward. Nearer and nearer to the earth settled the Red Cloud. The criminals in the camp were running wildly about. Several squads of them darted through the woods, only to come hurriedly back, where they called to their companions. "Ah, my men were evidently on the job," exclaimed the sheriff. "They're turning the rascals back."
Some of the gang were so alarmed at the sight of the great airship settling down on their camp that they could only stand there and stare at it. Others were gathering sticks and stones as if for resistance, and some could be seen to have weapons. Off to one side was a small hut, rather better than the rest of the tumble-down shacks in which the tramps lived. Tom noticed this and saw several men gathered about it. One seemed familiar to the lad. He called the attention of Mr. Damon to the fellow. "Do you know him?" asked Tom eagerly. "Bless my very existence, if it isn't Ensign Morse, one of the gang!" cried the eccentric man. "That's what I thought," agreed Tom. "The bank robbers are here," he added to the sheriff. "If we only recover the money, we'll be doing well," remarked Mr. Sharp. Suddenly there came a shout from the fringe of the woods surrounding the camp, and an instant later there burst from the bushes a number of men. "My posse!" cried the sheriff. "We ought to be down now." The airship was 100 feet above the ground, but Tom, opening wider the gas outlet, sent the craft more quickly down. Then, just as it touched the earth, he forced a mass of vapor into the container, making the ship buoyant so as to reduce the shock. An instant later the ship was stationary. Out leaped the sheriff. "Give it to 'em, men!" he shouted. With a yell his men responded and fired a volley in the air. "Come on, Tom," called Mr. Sharp. "We'll make for the hut where you saw Morse." I'll come too," cried Mr. Damon, rushing along as fast as he could, a seltzer bottle in either hand. Tom's chief interest was to reach the men he suspected were the bank robbers. The lad dashed through the woods toward the hut near which he had seen Morse. He and Mr. Sharp reached it about the same time. As they came in front of it, out dashed Happy Harry the tramp. He was followed by Morse and a man named Featherton. The latter carried a black valise. "Hey, drop that!" shouted Mr. Sharp. "Drop nothing!" yelled the man. Go on," urged Morse. "Take to the woods. We'll deal with these fellows." "Oh, you will, eh?" shouted Tom, and remembering his football days, he made a dive between Morse and Happy Harry for the man with the bag, which he guessed contained the stolen money. The lad made a good tackle and grabbed Featherton about the legs. He went down in a heap with Tom on top. Our hero was feeling about for the valise when he felt a stunning blow on the back of his head. He turned over quickly to see Morse in the act of delivering a second kick. Tom grew faint and dimly saw the leader of the gang reach down for the valise. This gave our hero sudden energy. He was not going to lose everything when it was just within his grasp. Conquering by a strong effort his feeling of dizziness, he scrambled to his feet and made a grab for Morse. The latter fended him off, but Tom came savagely back at him, all his fighting blood up. The effects of the cowardly blow were passing off. The lad managed to get one hand on the handle of the bag. "Let go!" cried Morse, and he dealt Tom a blow in the face. It staggered the youth, but he held on grimly and raised his left hand and arm as a guard. At the same time he endeavored to twist the valise loose from Morse's hand. The man raised his foot to kick Tom, but at that moment there was a curious hissing sound, and a stream of frothy liquid shot over the lad's head right into the face of the man, blinding him. "Ha! Take that, and more of it!" shouted Mr. Damon, and a second stream of seltzer squirted into the face of Morse. With a yell of rage he let go his hold of the satchel, and Tom staggered back with it. The lad saw Mr. Damon rushing toward the now disabled leader, playing both bottles of seltzer on him. Then, when all the liquid was gone, the eccentric man began to beat Morse over the head and shoulders with the heavy bottles until the scoundrel begged for mercy. Tom was congratulating himself on his success in getting the bag when Happy Harry, the tramp, rushed at him. "I guess I'll take that," he roared, and wheeling Tom around, at the same time striking him full in the face, the ugly man made a grab for the valise. His hand had hardly touched it before he went down like a log, the sound of a powerful blow causing Tom to look up. He saw Mr. Sharp standing over the prostrate tramp, who had been cleanly knocked out. "Are you all right, Tom?" asked the balloonist. "Yes, trifle dizzy, that's all. I've got the money." "Are you sure?" Tom opened the valise. A glance was enough to show that it was stuffed with bills. Happy Harry showed signs of coming to, and Mr. Sharp, with a few turns of a rope he had brought along, soon secured him. Morse was too exhausted to fight more, for the seltzer entering his mouth and nose had deprived him of breath, and he fell an easy prisoner to Mr. Damon. Morse was soon tied up. The other members of the Happy Harry gang had escaped. Meanwhile, the sheriff and his men were having a fight with the crowd of tramps. But as the posse was determined and the criminals mostly of the class known as hoboes, the battle was not a very severe one. Several of the sheriff's men were slightly injured, however, and a few of the tramps escaped. "A most successful raid," commented the sheriff, when quiet was restored and a number of prisoners were lined up, all tied securely. "Did you get the money?" "Almost all of it," answered Tom, who, now that Morse and Happy Harry were securely tied, had busied himself with the aid of Mr. Sharp and Mr. Damon in counting the bills. "Only about $2,000 are missing. I think the bank will be glad enough to charge that to profit and loss." "I guess so," added the sheriff. "I'm certainly much obliged to you for the use of your airship. Otherwise the raid wouldn't have been so successful. Well, now we'll get the prisoners to jail." It was necessary to hire rigs from nearby farmers to accomplish this. As for Morse and Happy Harry, they were placed in the airship, and under guard of the sheriff and 2 deputies were taken to the county seat. The criminals were too dazed over the rough treatment they had received and over their sudden capture to notice the fact, riding through the air to jail. "Now for home," cried Tom, when the prisoners had been disposed of. "Home to clear our names, and take this money to the bank." "And receive the reward," added Mr. Sharp with a smile. "Don't forget that." "Oh, yes, and I'll see that you get a share, too, Mr. Durkin," went on Tom. "Only for your aid we never would have gotten these men and the money." "Oh, I guess we're about even on that score," responded the official. "I'm glad to break up that gang." The next morning Tom and his friends started for home in the Red Cloud. They took with them evidence as to the guilt of the 2 men, Morse and Happy Harry. The men confessed that they and their pals had robbed the bank of Shopton the night before Tom and his friends sailed on their trip. In fact, that was the object for which the gang hung around Shopton. After securing their booty, they had gone to the camp of the tramps at Shagman, where they hid, hoping they would not be traced. But the words Tom had overheard had been their undoing. The men who arrived at the camp just before the raid were the same ones the young inventor heard talking in the office building. They had come to get their share of the loot which Morse held, and with which he tried so desperately to get away. Tom's injuries were not serious and did not bother him after being treated by a physician. End of chapter. Tom Swift and His Airship by Victor Appleton. Chapter 25. Andy Gets His Reward. Flying swiftly through the air, the young inventor and his 2 companions were soon within sight of Shopton. As they approached the town from over the lake and a patch of woods, they attracted no attention until they were near home, and the craft settled down easily in the yard of the Swift property. That the aged inventor was glad to see his son back need not be said, and Mrs. Baggert's welcome was scarcely less warm than that of Mr. Swift. Mr. Sharp and Mr. Damon were also made to feel that their friends were glad to see them safe again. "We must go at once to see Mr. Pendergast, the bank president," declared Mr. Swift. "We must take the money to him and demand that he withdraw the offer of reward for your arrest." "Yes," agreed Tom. "I guess the reward will go to someone besides Andy Foger." There was considerable surprise on the part of the bank clerks when our hero and his friends walked in, carrying a heavy bag. But they could only conjecture what was in the wind, for the party was immediately closeted with the president. Mr. Pendergast was so startled that he hardly knew what to say when Tom, aided by Mr. Sharp, told his story. But the return of the money with documents from Sheriff Durkin, certifying as to the arrest of Morse and Happy Harry, soon convinced him of the truth of the account. "It's the most wonderful thing I ever heard," said the president. "Well, what are you going to do about it?" asked Mr. Damon. "You have accused Tom and myself of being thieves and—" apologize most humbly," exclaimed Mr. Pendergast. "I also—" "What about the reward?" went on Mr. Damon. "Bless my banknotes, I don't want any of it, for I have enough. But I think Tom and Mr. Sharp and the sheriff are entitled to it." "Certainly," said the president. "Certainly. It will be paid at once. I will call a meeting of the directors. In fact, they are all in the bank now, save Mr. Foger, and I can reach him by telephone.
if you will just rest yourselves in that room where I will summon you before the board when it convenes, and be most happy to pay over the $5,000 reward. It is the most wonderful thing I ever heard of. Most wonderful." In a room adjoining that of the president, Tom, his father, and Mr. Damon waited for the directors to meet. Mr. Foger could be heard entering a little later. "What's this I hear, Pendergast?" he cried, rubbing his hand. "The bank robber is captured, eh? Well, that's good news. Of course we'll pay the reward. I always knew my boy was a smart lad. $5,000 will be a tidy sum for him. Of course his chum, Sam Snedeker, is entitled to some, but not much. So they've caught Tom Swift and that rascally Damon, eh? I always knew he was a scoundrel, putting money in here as a blind." Mr. Damon heard and shook his fist. "I'll make him suffer for that," he whispered. "Tom Swift arrested, eh?" went on Mr. Foger. "I always knew he was a bad egg. Who caught them? Where are they?" "In the next room," replied Mr. Pendergast, who loved a joke almost as well as did Tom. "They may come out now," added the president, opening the door and sending Ned Newton in to summon Tom, Mr. Swift, and Mr. Damon, who filed out before the board of directors. "Gentlemen," began the president, "I have the pleasure of presenting to you Mr. Thomas Swift, Mr. Barton Swift, and Mr. Wakefield Damon. I also have the honor to announce that Mr. Thomas Swift and Mr. Damon have been instrumental in capturing the burglars who recently robbed our bank, and I am happy to add that young Mr. Swift and Mr. Wakefield Damon have, this morning, brought to me all but a small part of the money stolen from us, which money they succeeded after a desperate fight." "A fight partly with seltzer bottles," interrupted Mr. Damon proudly. "Don't forget them." "Partly with seltzer bottles," conceded the president with a smile. "After a fight they succeeded in getting the money back. Here it is. And now I suggest that we pay the reward promised." "What reward? Pay them the money back? Isn't my son to receive the $5,000 for informing as to the identity of the thief, isn't he?" demanded Mr. Foger, almost suffocating from his astonishment at the unexpected announcement. "Hardly," answered Mr. Pendergast dryly. "Your son's information happened to be wrong. The tools he saw Tom have in the bag were airship tools, not burglars, and the same gang that once robbed Mr. Swift robbed our bank. Tom Swift captured them and is entitled to the reward. It will be necessary for us as directors to make up the sum personally, and I, for one, am very glad to do so." "So am I," came in a chorus from the others seated at the table. "But, I understand my son," stammered Mr. Foger, who did not at all relish having to see his son lose the reward. "It was all a mistake about your son," commented Mr. Pendergast. "Gentlemen, is it your desire that I write a check for young Mr. Swift?" They all voted in the affirmative, even Mr. Foger being obliged to do so, much against his wishes. He was a very chagrined man when the directors' meeting broke up. Word was sent at once by telegraph to all the cities where reward posters had been displayed, recalling the offer, and stating that Tom Swift and Mr. Damon were cleared. Mr. Sharp had never been really accused. "Well, let's go home," suggested Tom, when he had the $5,000 check in his pocket. "I want another ride in the Red Cloud as soon as it's repaired." "So do I," declared Mr. Damon. The eccentric man and Mr. Swift walked on ahead, and Tom strolled down toward the dock, for he thought he would take a short trip in his motorboat. He was near the lake, not having met many persons, when he saw a figure running up from the water. He knew who it was in an instant. Andy Foger. As for the bully, at the sight of Tom he hesitated, then came boldly on. Evidently he had not heard of our hero's arrival. "Huh!" exclaimed the red-haired lad. "I've been looking for you. The police want you, Tom Swift." "Oh, do they?" asked the young inventor gently. "Yes, for robbery. I'm going to get the reward, too. You thought you were smart. I saw those burglar tools in your valise. I sent the police after you.
"So you've come back, eh? I'm going to tell Chief Simpson." "You wait." "Yes," answered Tom, "I'll wait. So the police want me, do they?" "That's what they do," snarled Andy. "I told you I'd get even with you, and I've done it." "Well," burst out Tom, unable to longer contain himself as thought of all he had suffered at the hands of the red-haired bully, "I said I'd get even with you, but I haven't done it yet. I'm going to now. Take off your coat, Andy. You and I are going to have a little argument." "Don't you dare lay a finger on me," blustered the squint-eyed one. Tom peeled off his coat. Andy, who saw that he could not escape, rushed forward and dealt the young inventor a blow on the chest. That was all Tom wanted, and the next instant he went at Andy hammer and tongs. The bully tried to fight, but he had no chance with his antagonist, who was righteously angry and who made every blow tell. It was a sorry-looking Andy Foger who begged for mercy a little later. Tom had no desire to administer more than a deserved reward to the bully, but perhaps he did add a little for interest. At any rate, Andy thought so. "You just wait," he cried as he limped off. "I'll make you sorry for this." "Oh, don't go to any trouble on my account," said Tom gently, as he put on his coat. But Andy did go to considerable trouble to be revenged on the young inventor, and whether he succeeded or not you may learn by reading the fourth book of this series, to be called Tom Swift and His Submarine Boat, or Under the Ocean for Sunken Treasure, in which I shall relate the particulars of a voyage that was marvelous in the extreme. Tom reached home in a very pleasant frame of mind that afternoon. Things had turned out much better than he thought they would. A few weeks later the two bank robbers who were found guilty were sentenced to long terms, but their companions were not captured. Tom sent Sheriff Durkin a share of the reward, and the lad invested his own share in bank stock, after giving some to Mr. Sharp. Mr. Damon refused to accept any. As for Mr. Swift, once he saw matters straightened out and his son safe, he resumed his work on his prize submarine boat, his son helping him. As for Tom, he alternated his spare time between trips in the airship and his motorboat, and frequently a certain young lady from Roxman Seminary was his companion. I think you know her name by this time. Now, for a while, we will take leave of Tom Swift and his friends, trusting to meet them again. End of Tom Swift and His Airship.